Good morning, Arizona, and welcome listeners from around the globe. At 1700 hours Greenwich Mean Time, my name is Joe Brett, and this is the Veterans Heritage Hour. Before I introduce my guest today, I want to take a few minutes just to lay out the premise for why we think this show is valuable for us to present and why we think it's going to be informative and educational for you, the listener. In doing that, let me just lay out the situation. As any military commander would do, you would put out a 5-point operations order, and the first order of business would be the situation. We were at Cronkite School of Journalism last night listening to Tom Ricks, the Pulitzer Prize winning author, and he, along with Adam Basovich and James Fellows from the last week's Atlantic magazine, are telling a pretty damning story about our military and the state of our country. I think James Fellows said if he had to describe America today, he said it would be a chicken hawk nation, and meaning that there's a lot of people who want to go to war, but they want other people to. There's a lot of people who want war, but they want to send other people to fight it. And they're talking about the military coming off of 14 years of being engaged in war, but we're not winning the battle. We're not winning the objectives, the political objectives for which they were sent. And so there's concern in academia, there's concern in the military, and this is the situation in which now we have probably thousands of veterans who are going to be returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're going to be entering civilian life. And they're going to be asking the questions, what was it for, what did it mean, and how do we get on from here? And we think, and I think, that this show is the perfect forum to answer those questions and to be an educational vehicle, if you will, for those people who are interested in military matters, for those veterans who are still or are coming back from wars, and for people in general who are interested in what's going on in the United States and how we are thinking about the use of force, because it's changing. There's something dramatically changing. And helping us with that, we have the Veterans Heritage Project, and we have its founder here at our studio this morning. And we have a treasure trove of veterans who have served from World War II to Iraq and Afghanistan. And we'll be interviewing them, many of them, and get information from them and let them shed light on what their experience was and what it meant to them and what they think it meant to the nation. Also, we're now involved with the richness of Arizona State University. I can't tell you how deeply they're reaching into the community and how excellent are their educational programs. They recently formed a Center for the Study of the Future of Warfare, and we have gained access to that program through Daniel Rosenberg and Peter Bergen, who you might know from CNN. They're the co-directors, and so we last night met Tom Rich as a part of that center. We're also working with Linnell Caddy. She runs the Center for the Study of Religion and Conflict. So future wars are going to have to include ideas about and thoughts about and how to confront religious matters. We have the Middle East that's being torn apart along religious lines, and we have the United States being kind of divided along political lines. So in the midst of all of this confusion and all of the money and all of the PR politics that's going into our politics and our government and our military policy, how do we secure and make sure that the veterans, the people who are actually going to fight the war, have all the information they need before they either go to war and or when they come home? How are they going to think about what their heroic efforts were all about? So our mission statement then is actually our tagline, which is, we think we're where military history meets the future of warfare. And to help me talk through all of this, I want to introduce my guest this morning. First, Barbara Hatch. Barbara Hatch is the founder of the Veterans Heritage Project, and she'll tell us about that. But she is a former Peace Corps volunteer and a 40-year teacher. Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
And also joining me is my pal, David Lucere. David is a former Green Beret in Vietnam. And he was also a contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. So did you like my 1700 GMT time? I did it for all you guys wearing the big watches.
I had to look at my watch.
I know you did, and I hope you have it set. I hope you have it set for 1700, man.
It's where Mickey's big hand
Well,
is
that's for the Marines.
up, right?
That's for
And
the
little
Marines.
hand.
The Marines, the GMT guys are for all you Air America Special Forces guys to actually set those big watches that you wear. I noticed General Fridovich has now gone digital, so he's the new Green Beret. Maybe
Yes.
you analog guys are a little. You're a step behind. You're an hour. You're an hour off. But anyway, Barbara, let's start with you, and because you have a fascinating story, and you're actually our founder, and you're the reason why there is the Veterans Heritage Hour, because we took your name, and we are an extension of the Veterans Heritage Project. Where did you start off? You started off in Illinois, or?
I was born in Alton, Illinois, family of 10 kids, not too far from where David grew up over in St. Louis, but I didn't know him at the time.
Well, good for you.
And ended up in Chicago going to Loyola.
The Ramblers.
The Ramblers. They were terrible when I was there. But when I graduated in 1972, there weren't jobs in the United States for teachers. I got 50 rejections, and I ended up in the Peace Corps in Senegal.
Wow, Senegal.
Senegal in West Africa.
Wow.
I had to look it up on a map
To go?
to go.
You didn't know
Yes.
where it was?
No, I knew it was in West Africa, but that's it. So I taught there for 3 years. Tough job.
Yeah.
It made me look at America a little differently. I was there when Nixon and Watergate and all that came down. I had no idea what was going on. But the Africans' comment was, isn't it great to come from a country where even the president is not above the law?
Wow. They said that to you?
They said that to me. I thought that was interesting. So I came back, looked for a job again, ended up in Iran with some of my former teachers who had been in the Peace Corps, taught there for a year on
Where-
a Iranian Navy base up on the Caspian.
What was that? What was that? How did you get, what was that gig about, if I may
It's
ask?
just teaching English to Iranian Navy guys
military
who
guys.
were buying military hardware.
And that's the Shah was there then.
The Shah was in power, so that was a little odd. So then I came back again, ended up in the Virgin Islands. So I did that. Then
Teaching
I came
again?
back, teaching again. Then I came back and I ended up in Arizona after Hurricane Hugo. So I came here.
Oh, really? I didn't. That's
Yeah, our house, we had it 2 months and gone with the wind, as I say. But
down in the Caribbean.
Down the Caribbean. So I ended up here and just started teaching school. That's what I do. I teach school. So I was an English teacher. Now I'm a history teacher. So I love history.
Mhm.
And when the movie Saving Private Ryan came out, a student came up and asked me if it was accurate. So in any movie I see, I go read like 30 books afterwards just
Sure.
to double check. And I read a lot and I said, well, I wasn't there. Contrary to my gray hair, I wasn't there at Normandy, but let's ask, there must be somebody in Phoenix with 2 million people who was there. So I wrote a letter to the VFW and I started getting a call a night from a veteran,
Wow.
just wanting to
Were you at
talk.
Cactus Shadows High School at this
No,
time?
I was at Judson School, which
Uh-huh.
is closed over in here in Scottsdale. So the veterans started to come in, and I hooked up with a group out in Fountain Hills who started a Veterans in the Classroom program.
No kidding.
So I noticed that the kids could not get enough of this firsthand conversation with these veterans. We got Sylvester Herrera came in, and I had a student from Mexico, and the two of them had a bond. It was incredible. So I remember all these guys willing to come in and share with my students. So we did that. I did that every year for the next, let's see, when was Saving Private Ryan, 85, somewhere in there. So that just continued and continued and continued until in 2004, Salt River Project wanted to put some money into education programs, kids doing firsthand history. So we did a program with the Cave Creek Christmas pageant, and then the following year, kids said, we want to interview those vets.
By this time, you're up at Cactus Shadows?
By now I'm up at Cactus Shadows. The kids said, let's interview military. Let's interview these guys that come in every year and tell their story. This coincided with the establishment of the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. And their mission, and it was a unanimous vote of Congress, that's got to be a first.
Yeah. Those days are gone.
Those days are over. And
Nothing's too good for our boys. Well,
So they unanimously voted to establish the Veterans History Project, and it was started in 2000, and they have, last time I checked with Colonel Patrick, about 94,000 veteran accounts.
And your
archived.
program is the leading contributor to that program, is it not?
I think so. We have hit 1,000 interviews this year in our 10th year. Yeah, we're working on book 11. So we've
And I should
interviewed.
Point out that I'm in book number
1,000.
6 and David is in book number 10.
Page 247. but
Well, yeah,
Who remembers these things?
he read that off his watch, of course.
So it was hang on for the ride. I consider myself just a connector
Mhm.
because the mission is to connect. I'm yesterday's news. I'm 64, right? So you've got these teenagers who, some of my teenagers have been off to war. They've been to Iraq with Adam here.
Yeah,
So, I want them to go in eyes wide open. They need to understand
Yes.
why they're going, where they're going, what they're doing, unlike my Peace Corps days. But
You
that,
didn't know what
that
you were-
wasn't going to get me killed.
yeah.
At least I hope not. So it's really bringing them together, and we can talk later, but we even got to interview a World War I veteran that
Wow.
was 110 years old, all the way down to some of my students who were in the Middle East. So what I have learned myself is beautiful, but the connection between this teenager and some 94-year-old veteran, and they connect over time, is a magic moment. They always find something in common.
Well, this is probably, and I refer to it, Barbara has asked David and I, we're on her board, and we were honored to be teachers in her classroom. And I, as a veteran, have never been so honored as I was by your students. And that is a bond that lasted me a lifetime, actually, since that time. Corey and I read the letters from the students, and we kind of wept sitting around our table one night, my wife, Corey. And I said, wow, I've never been so touched and so honored for being a veteran as I was by your students. And that drew me into becoming a more active volunteer. David, you started off in St. Louis? No, you moved around. Your dad.
No, I'm a Floridian by birth.
Wow.
Tallahassee, as a matter of fact.
Your dad, was that your Navy dad? Your dad was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, right?
My dad was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, floated around the South Pacific for a
A
couple
Notre
of years.
Dame man, I may add.
That he was, and spent a couple of years in the South Pacific on the USS Softly, a destroyer, a Fletcher-class destroyer.
Hoorah.
Yeah.
Destroyers.
And it just so happened, I found out years later, too, that his XO was Elmo Zumwalt.
No kidding.
And so that was kind of an interesting historical twist.
Sure.
They were awarded 16 battle stars, which was one of the highest number of battle stars in that theater at that time for
that destroyer. Was that the Pacific Theater?
Pacific Theater.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kamikazes
Yeah.
and all of those things.
My mom was a women's air service pilot, a WASP, or as they they're fiercely loyal to their brand. And you're not a WASP, you are WASP.
Oh, wow.
And so
There's a neat picture of your mom on that airplane. She flew a bunch of types
she
of
flew
airplanes.
a bunch of airplanes,
Yeah.
and that group is those 1,100 women flew over 60 million miles during World War II, all within the continental United States and North America. But they were very, very active throughout the war years, and unfortunately didn't receive their veterans benefits until 1977.
Wow.
And Barry Goldwater, Arizona's Barry Goldwater, was instrumental in getting them their veteran status. So mom and dad, they meet in Colorado. She's from Spokane, Washington. My dad's from Abilene. His family had a lifelong relationship with Dwight Eisenhower.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
In Texas.
And in Abilene, Kansas.
Abilene, Kansas,
There is
yes.
in Abilene, Texas.
Yeah.
Abilene, Kansas, and they remained friends for throughout their lifetimes.
Wow.
So so there was a history of service. I had a cousin who flew missions off the Kitty Hawk. Running bombing raids in North Vietnam until he was shot down shortly before I went to Vietnam.
Wow.
And fortunately he was rescued. But I was at a junior ROTC high school, Christian Brothers High School in St. Louis.
So your parents by that time had married and he'd moved to St. Louis, and he was
they'd moved around. They'd moved to Florida because my dad just got out of the Navy and started working as a salesperson, selling telecommunication equipment to small phone companies. And
Wow.
Moved to Rochester, New York, and then to St. Louis.
Wow.
And so St. Louis kind of home record. From there, kind of went to, I went into the Army, joined the Special Forces. It took me a year and a half to get through the training. Finished that, came back to Arizona, Arizona State University,
Yeah.
and then went on to my career. And then after the 9/11 incident, I was asked to join a group to contract for security work in Iraq. And then I had the opportunity to work with the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force in Afghanistan.
And Admiral Mullen, you were a bodyguard for Admiral Mullen, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I didn't bodyguard him, but I did have the chance to meet him on several occasions, and I was very fortunate that they were private meetings, and we got to talk a lot. And the foundation, or the nonprofit that I founded, the Arizona Veterans Military Leadership Alliance, was based on his model. So after Afghanistan, came home, got involved in veterans advocacy, and here I am.
Here you are, is right.
Yeah.
And I should mention that you're in the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame.
I was inducted, I was honored and inducted in 2009.
So when David and I are on the road, he has his green beanie, and then he has his sacred Hall of Fame hat that he keeps in a particular neat folder.
Mm-hmm.
And on an occasion when it comes to when we're having to impress the population, he pulls out his Hall of Fame hat.
And if you don't behave, I'll get out my copper sword from the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Are you in the Hall? Yeah, right. So we're involved with the Hall of Fame. I think we got a break coming up here semi-soon. So you're 2 minutes. So you're listening to the vetsonmedia.com, and this is the Veterans Heritage Hour. And before we take a break, I just want to, how did you guys meet up? How did you find David?
Man, I would have
for the interview.
I would have to think about that.
I don't know where I met you.
Could have been at a Hall of Fame dinner where we were. I think, in fact, it could have been at the where you were awarded the Copper Sword
Yeah.
Award, and that's the annual gala for the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame. So,
So what is the Copper Sword? What is that award?
It's awarded to a civilian that promotes and honors veterans. So I had to compete with Steven Spielberg, so I laughed a lot about it. I didn't have a cold chance in hell of getting that one.
Was
Until I
Steven
looked-
there? Was Steven?
No, no, he
sent in
didn't
a
show up.
He
but,
didn't show. No show, Steven. Come on.
But when I won, I mean, I was shocked. But then a lot of the guys that were on the panel, I had interviewed for our book, so it was a great honor. It hangs very nobly, and when my students misbehave, they go, "Is that a real sword?" I said, "You want to test it out?"
That's right. There's nobody more loved in the veterans community than Barbara Hatch. I mean, everybody who was a veteran, who has met her, who has been interviewed by her, and her students knows her, loves her. She has great support and great rapport. And when we come back from the break here, I hope she tells some of her great stories. She has mission moments before every board meeting, and I wish we should write a book about those mission moments, and it's the connectivity with the veterans and their students that are just priceless. So this is Vets on Media. Birdman, are we out of here, or you're holding up your hand here?
Yep.
Taking a break right now. Come back, join us. We'll finish up this conversation. We'll start eating snakes that taste like chicken, and we'll go into the mic force with our man David Lucer here.
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex Handyman Construction and Landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, "Thank you for your service" to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org, or call 928-284-2022.
Break a one now. How about that bandit? You got them ears on, son? Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training. They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. If you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
Welcome back to the Veterans Heritage Hour, the place where military history meets the future of warfare. Our guests today are Barbara Hatch, the founder of the Veterans Heritage Project, and David Lucer, Arizona Hall of Fame member, former Green Beret, and former contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. David, let's get back to Vietnam, because that's my war as well. And you led a Mike Force. Can you explain what a Mike Force is?
Sure. It was a project, a special project of the 5th Special Forces Group, which was the group assigned to Southeast Asia, but mainly Vietnam. There were a few of us that were involved in some cross-border activities into Laos, Cambodia, and we did send some teams into North Vietnam. But the Mike Force was a special operations group that worked mostly or primarily with Montagnard tribal peoples from the Central Highlands. There were some ethnic Chinese and there were some Laotians and some Cambods, but for the most part, these were Montagnards that served. They were a private army. They were recruited, trained, supplied, and paid for, taken care of by the 5th Special Forces Group. My group was called the Mobile Strike Force, or Mike Force, and our two primary responsibilities was to defend or take back Special Forces camps that were along the border on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, or interdict men and materials coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So I worked the tri-border area quite a bit, and we were there was no search in our search and destroy missions. We always knew where everybody was all the time. I mean, it's pretty hard to miss, 3,000-4,000 people gathered, eating breakfast just across the border.
The NVA Army, right?
The NVA, the North Vietnamese Army. And we made friends with the 66th Regiment, along with the 33rd, the 23rd.
Excuse me, but we may have, I have Facebook friends, and I've let the word out to them that I'm having this radio show, and we have friends in Vietnam now who may have been in that unit. David and I are looking forward to having some reunion with our North Vietnamese former enemies.
I went back into Vietnam in the year 2000 and had a little driver who always asked, and people there are very courteous and very honoring of Americans.
Yes.
Now going back to Vietnam, this was a young fellow, a little bit younger than myself, but asked me if I'd been there before. And of course I said, yes. And he said, what years? I said 68 and 69. And he kind of did one of these looking around kind of things, and then rolled up his pant leg, and he had a scar that ran from the back of his knee all the way to his ankle. And he pointed at it with a big smile on his face. It was American Bullet, 1973. So this was kind of, you're right. I mean, that's the kinds of receptions that we get.
I couldn't have, I don't know if it's their Buddhist philosophy, but they're so gracious on the Facebooks. And I'm seeing pictures of Saigon Guider. He's one of the Facebook guys, and his son is a Boy Scout. And there's pictures of he, with his hands up doing the Boy Scout oath. And they're gracious, lovely to us now. It's almost as if we won the war, and there's that way with the French as well. So this acrimony between former enemies doesn't exist between us and the Vietnamese. And I don't know, it's interesting. It's an interesting.
Well, on my trip back to Vietnam in 2000, had an opportunity to actually go to a Montagnard village.
Yeah.
Where they were of course, it was near Kontum. We were based out of Kontum, which is just east of the tri-border area.
Uh-huh.
And so we recruited out of that area, and that's the area I went back to. And so they were very, very, the few men that were there of my age or a little younger, had all served with either the Mike Force or MACV-SOG.
Yeah.
They weren't citizens, so they never fought or joined the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the ARVN. So we had a great conversation. He took me all through the village and showed me the cooking area. I indicated I'd like a handmade basket. And he went through probably a dozen baskets before he found just the one he thought was right. And I told him I'd trade my watch for him, and I forgot to give him the watch after I got the basket, and he pointed
at the watch,
reminding me that it was now time for me to fulfill my side of the deal.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
This fellow Facebooking me says, hey, he knew I flew, and so he said, hey, my dad was shooting at you, and my mom was out, rebuilding the roads that you guys bombed. And my wife says, well, write him back and tell him thank you for not being such a great shot.
Speaking of which, tell us a little bit about your background and your military history.
Well, thank you for asking, David. I thought, what a harsh crowd this is. But Tom Ricks last night mentioned he was talking about Fort Drum. He was talking about generals and Drum, not being such a great general, got this puny little fort named after him. And I says, hey, man, that's my hometown. I'm from Watertown, New York. And so that's where I started off, in Watertown near Fort Drum. And I grew up like you did, and like most kids, playing Little League and playing sports. And our coaches, as it turns out, were Korean veterans and World War II vets, and very humble and modest about it. But, you grew up with respecting them so much that it was just part of the fabric of your youth, that at some point in time when your country called, that you would serve it. And I didn't think twice. So, from Watertown High School, which I loved and had a great 3 years or 4 years, friendships that were just precious. I went to St. Bonaventure University, and I have a great group of friends from there to this day. And it's almost like it is an extended family. Their sons and daughters are like nieces and nephews. Anyway, that was a bonding experience. And then, too, it was a conservative school back in the day, back in the 60s. And, service, we were in ROTC. A lot of guys, we were sissies, ROTC guys, because the guys who joined the Marine Corps PLC program used to laugh at us, right? Oh, you guys are, wimps, we're going to be Marines. So I wasn't, I was playing some sports and hanging out with my guys. I wasn't what you'd call a great student. And I can hear all the guys in Buffalo, New York laughing now, but we had a great time. And we just had a great time. And I loved them dearly and still do. And we communicate on a daily basis. But anyway, did ROTC, wound up at the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment in Fort Lewis, Washington, thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to miss Vietnam. I'm going to be on this Reforger mission where the Cav is going to be going to Germany, and I'm going to go to Germany. I'm going to luck out. Not so fast, Lieutenant Brett. All the artillery officers, which was a field artillery officers, got rifted, and we got orders to go to Vietnam because they didn't need tanks. They didn't need armored cav. They needed FOs. And so all the artillery officers got sent to Vietnam. And interestingly, I went home on leave. We were living near Saratoga Springs at the time. And I drove down to my brother, who was in Vietnam ahead of me. He got wounded in 1967. And he was getting out of he was being treated at Walter Reed and getting out of the Army at Fort Meade. And so I was driving down on my leave to get him, help him move out. And I drove through Woodstock, which I didn't even know it was at the time, right? So I said, who are all these hippie jerks? Get these out of the way. It was rainy and soggy, and these people were all over this highway, Route 17. Get these creeps out of the way, man. I'm going down to get my brother. We were going to party, of course, on his getting out of the Army. And so anyway, I did that, flew to San Francisco, and on my way to Vietnam, went up to see Haight-Ashbury. And with my butter bar in the sun and I went in uniform. I had never seen a hippie. I didn't know what a Hare Krishna was. I didn't know, who knew? So I went up to this park and.
It hasn't changed a bit.
Well, yeah, right. So I went up to this park and walked through and, like a tourist. And some guy comes up to me with a Berkeley barb, which happened to be that particular issue, was this artist rendering of a penis with flowers and things coming out of it and around it. And he stuck that in my face and he says, take this to Vietnam, you big a-hole, And I said, well, I guess I now know what these hippies are all about and what the Hare Krishnas are all about. And so that was my first evidence, really, not first, but really first exposure to a counterculture, which I really didn't know much about. I kind of believed that what we were going to do and what I was going to do was what my nation wanted. And lo and behold, it may not have been. So, but anyway, that's what got me to Vietnam. And I got there and was assigned to the 108th Artillery Group. And instead of being an FO, I got this wonderful job of being an aerial observer. And an aerial observer, I flew with these pilots, the Cat Killers, the 220th Reconnaissance Aircraft Company out of Phu-Bai. And they flew me and my 5 other lieutenants and our 5 other lieutenants who were called Sundowners. And we flew the demilitarized zone from the ocean, from the South China Sea into Laos and around and up into North Vietnam and down around Khe Sanh and looking for NVA infiltrators and picking up targets of, trying to shoot them, kill them with artillery and airstrikes. And we shot some naval gunfire. And I had a hell of a tour, with most people like you were down in the mud. And being grunts, I had this great life of an aviator, which is a wholly, completely different way of life than being. It's not the Army that most people think of.
Not big green.
Not big green, and I wasn't a big green guy. I wasn't what you'd call I wasn't a great lieutenant, I have to say. But I got to be a good observer, and I was a good teammate, I thought, and I enjoyed it. I never enjoyed the Army until I got to finally the job and finally my team and finally the pilots. And I loved them and then think of them dearly to this day. Of course, that's the nature. That's the bonding that took place. And that's the bonding that I felt and still do. And I hope they're all out there listening. And but anyway, that was a great experience. That was an adventure. It was heady. It was dangerous. But it was a bonding experience. And boy, we fought hard. I thought we got up every day and went after them.
And you flew in a bird dog.
A bird dog, man. I just had
that to me barely qualifies as an airplane.
Come on, you eat snakes, man. We
It's
had
like something out of World War I.
well, it is something out of
No,
World War
it's
I.
got a wing, an engine, a couple of wheels, and
a guy in the back, man.
And that's about it.
When he's cranking, there's the bird man. There's our producer cranking it up there. Come on, these bird dog pilots, these cat killers are out there. We were down after him. We couldn't see, because the enemy was so camouflaged. So we went down. We trolled for him and calculated risk. The pilots would cut it. We'd roll in and we'd get hosed down. And you just wait for the bullet to hit you. There come some holes through the airplane, and you were just winching, waiting to bullet to hit you and hoping it would hit you in a fatty part of the body that wouldn't kill you. And if you made it out, which we always did, man, we brought a world of hurt on those people who were shooting at us. And so we had 8-inch, we had artillery, we had TAC air, we had, we ran airstrikes, and every now and then the Navy steamed in and wanted us to shoot their ships. So I adjusted naval gunfire from the Turner Joy, great ship, historical ship, the Turner Joy, the St. Paul, and the Canberra. And so that all said and done, I knew in 1969 that we weren't going to win that war, and really felt it in 1970 when I was coming home. You know, they were pulling out the Marine Corps. We worked for the 3rd Marine Division, and it was on their birthday, November 10th, 1969. They were pulling out and got gloriously drunk with a rear guard and played mumbly beg with a K-bar, right? And became an honorary Marine, and they pulled out. It was a sad day. When the Marines are pulling out, man, you know that the war's not going good, or, you know, you're not going to win it. So that was my experience. And so I came back to the States and was getting out, had to serve some time in the reserves, which I, you know, didn't like much, but I had to do it. And wound up teaching school and wound up going to grad school in Minnesota and getting a teacher's certificate, and wound up getting back into state government in New York State. Loved that. And then eventually got into grad school at the Kennedy School of Government, where I fell in love with this international development and this whole debate on national security. And because I was looking for answers. Why was I in Vietnam? Why did we lose? Who sent us? What was the rationale? You know, who's responsible? And so that led me down to an admiration for the people who think about it. And then a discerning look at the personalities involved and who sends us to war.
So you've kind of come full circle on this, this idea of what is war, what it's about.
Yes. And
You've not
so
only experienced it, but you're academically engaged, if you will.
I'm academically enthralled with this, what's going on at Arizona State University. This Center for the Study of Warfare, I hope I bring some semblance of the Kennedy School to this table here, that we have a conversation like we're having now with these great minds, because the GIs probably are not aware, but it's great minds now. It's not the generals who pick the wars. It's these academics who are involved in coming up with neoconservative viewpoints and other kinds of viewpoints, and they battle it out academically, and then politicians pick up the rationale for whatever they want to do and how they want to go to war. You know, it used to be it was just and unjust wars, and now it's preemptive wars. And so the wars of choice that politicians have made, that have put their military in a bad place, we haven't won them. And that is the cry from the media now, and from retired generals and colonels and academia. So that's the conversation we want to have.
Yeah, and what was interesting to me, because I think you were at the same seminar with I think about a half a dozen flag officers.
Yeah.
At talking to a group at Arizona State University,
Exactly,
about the future of warfare. And it dawned on us as we were sitting there that there wasn't anybody in this room that had ever won a war.
right. And they were actually speaking to a group of ROTC cadets and trying to jazz up the, why they should join. And one of these young Air Force brigadiers was talking again. This is the military. He was saying, "Oh boy, we need more money for equipment." And he was lamenting the fact that, grandfathers were going to be flying the same bird as their grandsons, the B-52. And you and I looked at it and says, well, so what? It's not the point of the age of the plane, and
It flies, it drops bombs.
And it drops a lot of bombs. And so
completes the mission.
But here's the Air Force, and I guess this is not just the Air Force, but everybody is, the push is to get more money into buying equipment. And that was what James Fallows talked about, and we'll talk about that after the break, and that's going to lead us into the rest of our shows. Adam, how are we doing for time here?
Good. Just one more minute.
One more minute. I haven't got a minute left. My stories, man, last a lifetime.
I know they do.
Do you still stay in touch with some of the folks that you served with in Vietnam?
Yes, I do. Actually, I do, and I got a great story, several stories, but they'll be busting my chops. There's no doubt about that. I'm sure Glenn Stewart and Rod Stewart and Kurt and Jerry DeGrazia was out in Boston, still shoveling out, Jerry, I hope. And we lost a good one. John Hillman was a legend. He just died. He was an Indian from Mowgli, Oklahoma. He was flying with him was an experience. So this is the Veterans Heritage Hour. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey, everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
Break a 19. How about that bandit? You got them ears on, son?
Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training. They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. And if you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex Handyman Construction and Landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, thank you for your service to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org or call 928-284-2022.
This is the Veterans Heritage Hour, and you're listening to two great veterans and authors of veteran stories and great friends of the veterans community. Barbara Hatch, the founder of the Veterans Heritage Project, and David Lucero, board member and former Green Beret and friend. I introduced these folks, and we just told our stories to give you a sense. These Barbara and David and I will be hosts and or co-hosts on various shows, and we just wanted to let you know how we earned our seat here at the microphone. We're all involved with veterans issues and veterans affairs, and I'd like to ask Barbara more about how that program, the Veterans Heritage Project, how that works exactly, how you set that up.
Well, I laugh about earning my seat, but if you're going to connect students with veterans, I can do the student part.
You're great at it.
And I love kids. I still love kids, and I still get to work with kids, even though I'm retired from the formal teaching part, and I love history. So what happened is, as these young people connected with veterans, there was a continuity to history, because I worry. I mean, the old saying that we're always fighting the last war, and that we need to understand, kids need to understand and be grateful for where they've come, what sacrifices have been made for them to go to the mall and have the life that they have. So I think these connections really help them to appreciate, their own lives. What I've noticed, of course, what happened is that, you meet other teachers and they say, well, if this is good for your kids, this would be good for my kids. And so with a few people in whose sons and daughters were in my program, like Laura Byers, and veterans like you guys, we established a nonprofit in 2009, I think. So now we're at 23 schools. And I continue to get the emails and hear the stories, the same stories of the unbelievable connection between the students and the veterans. And people say, well, you're promoting war. I said, promoting war? The last people on the planet who promote war are veterans. I mean, they know better than anybody what war is. And so these kids, and they connect with these vets on every level. It's not just about what did you do in service, but what did you do with the rest of your lives? Because World War II guys might have been in for 3 years, and then they've had another 75 or 80 doing something else. So it's more than that. So I love these connections. They're going to outlive me. When you look at one boy lost his mother, he was writing about a Vietnam dog handler named Tom Milburn. Between the interview and the essay, his mother passed away virtually overnight. She was in her 30s. And the first one to reach out to her was Tom. And when it got to deadline time, I said, you know, Ian, if you can't write that story, you've been through a lot, I will write it. And he looked at me and he said, this is my story and this is my veteran. So he wrote the story. We went out to Tom's and he read it out loud to Tom because we had a deadline. And to look at Tom's face while Ian was reading this story is a sight I will never forget. The love and connection between two men who understood loss, understood each other. And I told that story at the DAR convention where I met General Odierno. And what a fine human being. And he was overwhelmed by this story of this young boy and this dog handler. And so I see this all the time. About a month ago, we got to go out to Luke, met Colonel Gallegos, who's the reserve wing commander, saw his F-16. He took us out on the flight line.
Wow.
This girl loves airplanes. And she's adopted out of Korea. She was adopted out of Korea as an infant. And she loves airplanes, and she writes about them in a poetic fashion that's just beautiful, but appreciates this connection to go and interact. I also took her and some students to Korea because I'm a believer, and I always have been, that if you want to understand a people, you need to walk in their shoes, and you need to go to where things happened in history. So I've taken students to Normandy 3 times. I've taken them to England. We went to the Duxford Air Base there. I've taken them to Vietnam. 2 of the girls crawled through the Cu Chi tunnels, which they've widened for fat Americans. So I've taken them there, and they said that's the first time they really understood completely not completely, they're not that, but that they understood the sacrifices that were made. And I've taken them to Korea, and in about 6 weeks, we're going to Italy. We're going to go to Anzio and Monte Cassino because one of my young students interviewed a guy who was shot down off Anzio. And so just to go there really helps them understand America's story. Where we're going in the future, I cannot tell you. Every time I do an interview, I ask Vietnam veterans, should we have gone? I get a mixed reaction. You can't judge the past by today's stuff, and you have to be very careful of that. I haven't answered these questions for myself, but I tell young people, you have to answer those questions for yourself. Whether Adam should have been in the Middle East, I can't say. But when I watch these guys beheaded today, I want to go join David's Mike Force and head on out with the guys.
Yeah, everybody.
It's infuriating.
Yes.
So I don't know, the future of warfare to me is a tricky thing. What I have noticed, and I'll finish with this, is that the World War II guys jumped in because they felt their mortality. And I've started a chapter in my hometown of Alton, Illinois. But I have to do now the interviews about my friends' fathers who are gone.
Yeah.
I have to do them with their children. Found one he was on the Great Artiste with Boxcar and that group that did the bombing. Another one that was in tanks in Europe. I never knew these stories, and I think that's a huge loss that they didn't talk when we were growing up. Somewhere in that process of the last 11 years, the Vietnam veterans started to say, we need to tell our story. And I'm here to be there because that's my generation. And for the current guys coming back and all of the trauma they're going through, it just breaks my heart to see these guys taking their lives.
Me too, and that's why we're having this radio show.
And one guy said to us, he goes, "You literally saved my life," because he told his story to a young person who cared. So it works on many, many, many different levels for me.
You couldn't. I hope all our listeners got that, because that was perfect and precious. And that's the reason for the show. We are the bridge between our generation of veterans, the World War II veterans, the Korean veterans, and we want to assist and help the Iraq and Afghani veterans who are coming back, and
And
hopefully.
you guys are the first one to go meet them at the airport, too,
Yes.
Vietnam guys.
And because it never happened to us that way, and although I was personally treated well, I was just going to say, growing up in Watertown, you know, on my little league team, the coach was a guy by the name of Tom Cahill, who was a Korean War vet, who was at Pork Chop Hill, and my teammate was Johnny McHugh, who's now the Secretary of the Army. And so there's a rich legacy and a heritage that we want to draw upon, and I'm sure Barbara will bring in some of these World War II vets, and we'll have Green Beret guests with David. We have lined up a couple. General Fridovich has agreed to be on, retired 3-star general. We have Jim Kelsey coming on, who was helped set up Project Delta. Actually, he was a liaison between the Special Air Service and Delta. But we do have an obligation on this show. We're often asked, what should I do, Mr. Brett? And what do you think? Should I join? Should I go into ROTC? And, you know, we both listened to Andrew Basevich when he was asked that question at the ASU. And he lost his son in Iraq, and it was quite touching. An ROTC student said, what do you think, Mr. Basevich, Colonel Basevich, what do you think about us going and enlisting? And he said, and he choked. He had a tough time getting it out. He said, you know, if you have to, yes, but my God, you have a life to live. Think about your life, the fullness of your life. Think about that before you think about going into the military. And now, yes, we would all like to go over, and who wouldn't want to get in on getting these guys who were beheading people? I mean, those are the, you know, we spent 10 years in Vietnam, it seems, killing all the wrong people, you know, and so it's just horrible to think about it. And so how do we think about it? How do we have the right commanders in place, the right political people in place to think properly about it, so we're not throwing lives away? You know, one of the comments James Fallows made was, I think it was Robert Gates said, you know, we spent $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion on the war in Iraq, and we'd be better off having burnt it. You know, it's wasted. We would have done less harm with that $1.5 million had we burned it than we spent it on, you know, 13 years of warfare. Now we've stirred up the whole Middle East, and we've gotten more problems than we ever had before. That was his comment. So there's also a mention in there was the fraud and abuse. We've politicized the contract. It's political engineering, where these big schemes of big bombers and big other planes and things that want to be made, they spread them around congressional districts, so everybody wants a piece of it. They pass through Congress, and the idea is just to keep the money wheeling through the expenditures. And Robert Gates says, you couldn't have invented a dumber way to spend money on our military. So where does a human life, where does your son or daughter, where do they fit in there? The most precious thing we have in America is our children, and how to recommend to them to go to war or not go to war, and for who? Is it a Republican war, a Democratic war, and what are the stakes, and who's really behind this? What's in our best interest, and what's in their best interest? Yes, everyone wants to sacrifice for their country, but my God, are the politicians worthy of the sacrifice of the people that you talked about? I don't see it right now. And so we'll have on Ruben Gallego, who's a new congressman, a Marine. Congresswoman Sinema has agreed to bring in Bob McDonald, the new president, I should say. That would be a thing. That would be probably the apt statement CEO but he's a new secretary for the Veterans Administration. So we're going to bring in these people who have had some insight. And you, the listener, you make up your own mind, but we want to be truthful with our presentations. We want to bring in people who have something to say, and who have thought about it. This knee-jerk reaction of, yeah, I'd like to kill the guy who took off somebody's head or burn somebody in a cage. Wouldn't that be sweet? I mean, who wouldn't want to do that if you're...
How many do you lose to do that?
That's right. And at what expense, and what's the longer range mission? You know, we've gotten into 2 wars yet without an end strategy. So thankfully, someone's thinking about, you know, you can't rush in with ground troops. You have to think about this softly. And I have students now in Morocco. We're going to be talking about religion and conflict. And I have great students who've educated me in our Sister City program about what is the meaning of Islam in their lives. And they've been wonderful. And if you could meet them, we're not at war with Islam. And I hate it when people come up, because that's just what the freaks and the extremists want. They want this huge Armageddon between, you know, with Islam and the rest of the world. And we have to prevent that if we're smart. So this climb to war, this chicken hawk nation of building military material and getting other people to do the fighting while other people make money at it, and our political system awash with money. And I have to ask, where about the veteran? What about the soldier? And as a lieutenant, the troops always come first. And my obligation is to keep them free and safe and to not send them out on a fool's errand. And so that's part of the mission of our radio show, and we hopefully the guests that we bring in every month and every week will shed light on this question that's going to be with us for a long time, because we're going to be fighting for a long time. This nation's going to be a war for the foreseeable future. Any comments before we close? Our next guest.
I just wanted to say that as a teacher, I'm a believer in truth, and growing up in Vietnam where the truth was elusive. And I had a boyfriend in Vietnam and people marching to the armory in Chicago after Kent State. And I didn't know what to do. It was a real seminal moment to be standing there crying, because to go with the protesters was a betrayal of my boyfriend who's in Vietnam. And I want to know the facts.
Yeah.
I can make up my mind within reason, but I want to know what's going on. I want to know the truth.
I hear you.
And that's how you elect your politicians. My young people they're so excited now. They're turning 18. They I get to vote. They need to know what they're voting about. So David, I'm going to have to turn you have a comment.
No, I think that engagement is and the truth will follow. But we have to engage. We have to engage on a lot of different levels, and the media, Vets on Media, has given us that opportunity to engage a community, a whole community. And so, real quickly, I just want to thank Adam and James for giving us this opportunity, and we look forward to a great series with great people, and we look forward to coming back next week. And the weeks following.
Next week is Susan Key and Tim Ganal will be talking about Korea, and Dr. Sung Lee, a Korean, will be here talking about post-traumatic stress. There's some wonderful new treatments that the Special Operation Group is looking into. So be with us next week. I look forward to being your host again. You've been listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on vetsonmedia.com.